In this tutorial, we're going to be looking at one-point perspective. We're going to be needing our T-square 11 by 17 paper, which I already have taped down. So it's really filling the whole screen here. So good size, got to work with. Blue pencil and a lead pencil is all we're going to need to be able to work this up. So first off, in perspective and working with one point and such, we need a horizon line. So, you know, here's about halfway up on the height of the page. We're going to go a little bit higher than that and put down a line right across. And on that line, we want to put our one point. So it should be in the center of the page. So we could measure that out, or we can find a nice little cheat. I like any shortcuts. We know 8.5 or 11 by 17 is twice the size of the 8.5 by 11. So if I take my letter size page, put it down, and how much it covers, I know that's going to be the center of the page. So I'll put that point down. Okay, so 8.5, we could either measure 8.5 or just reference that height there. So this is going to be our vanishing point, which all the perspective and depth of our objects are going to go towards. But what we're going to do first is draw a grid on the lower 2/3 of our page below that horizon line. So we're going to start with just using our T-square to do those nice solid perpendicular horizontal lines. And we're going to create those, and we're just going to move the T-square down a slight bit more each time so that they get just slightly further apart from each other as we move the T-square down. Okay, so hopefully you can see those. Maybe I can go a little bit darker on that, making sure that that picks up. So I'm making them relatively close together, but as I get farther away, I'm going to make them bigger and bigger. So just getting these lines getting further apart as I go down the page creates a certain amount of depth. So I want to take advantage of all the tricks to give us the idea of perspective depth in our page. So here I flipped this over because my art table being on an angle, it doesn't let my T-square go all the way down on the top. Okay, so there we go. Then we need a straight edge. Well, actually, before we go too far, before I abandon my T-square, I want to make a perfectly vertical line from that one point. So I'm going to take my T-square across, set up my set square, whatever size you have, whatever angle, as long as it's straight here, and bring that down. So now we have a perfectly horizontal line and a perfectly vertical line. And what I'm going to do from there is I'm going to radiate that line out. So I'm going to do both sides, but I'll start on one. And my objective is to try and make these squares a little bit more horizontal than square or any other depth. So let me see how we can work that out. There we go. That's not looking too bad. Again, if that gives you an indication of where spacing and such works. And again, each of these little squares should look more horizontal, kind of a angled rectangle. I think there's a name for that. I can't remember if that was a rhombus or what our 2D shapes were the names. I'm not good at memorizing. That's why we make notes, so we can look back and figure it out. Okay, so we bring that so these lines come all the way up and work our way up from that point to the edge of the paper and work up into the side there. So we can see we've got all these little blocks here. So we'll do the same on the other side. And then we'll be all set up to start placing some dimensional objects on this plane and working with this 1-point perspective. So this is a follow along video, so I'm hoping you're setting up and you're following this step by step and you're replicating all of the things I've been doing on the page, and that is what you're going to be submitting. So again, if you're doing this 11 by 17 paper, which I'm hoping you're doing, so we got lots of room, space to draw everything out, not getting so tiny. And you know, the final product, yeah, you'll have to scan that in 2 sections and stitch that together, like in that video previously. You can look that one back up if it's been a while, so that we can get that submission of this drawing. Okay, so we have that grid. So how 1-point perspective works, and I'll get my T-square. We are going to need that on occasion here. I'm going to draw a 2D shape, and that's what's great about 1-point perspective. We can start with 2D shapes. So I'm going to draw a line across. Let me see, yeah. I'm just trying to figure out whereabouts I'm going to put it. Let's go here. I'm going to try and make it equal on both sides. And you know, I could measure that out, or I can use my little cheat sheet here. So if we've gone from here to here, I'm going to go from here to there. So once I've got that line, I can take my set square and I'm going to draw a vertical line coming upwards from there. And then I'm going to do a line across this way. So I have a 2D cube, maybe slightly rectangular. And then what I'm going to do is going to make its double line. So I'm going to give it some thickness. And I'll eyeball it here, but again, we could use our little cheat just to make sure that the thickness here is the same as here. And then using our set square, I'm going to give this some depth with vertical lines this way. So now we have a solid piece here working away. Now, if I get rid of my T-square right now, I use my set square. If each corner, the inside of our square here that I've created, if we take the corner and take it to the vanishing point and do the same on this side, take this corner and do the same. We're going to bring that in to the center and do the same on this one. I already happen to have a line going there, which is good. Now I'm going to need my T-square again, and I'm going to draw a line across here. And there, where that comes across, as soon as that makes contact, I'm going to bring a line upwards using my set square. There we go. And hopefully these line up. Maybe not quite. Let me just see. There we go. So, looking at this, and now if I go in with my lead pencil, and I'm just going to take my straight edge, and I'm going to do in pencil of what I would like the viewer to see as my object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an open box here. Again, drawing through so I know that perspectives work, makes sense. And again, to make sure these lines are perfect, you can be using the T-square and set square. I'm just being careful here that I'm tracing over those blue lines so that I've got these parallel, perfectly parallel, both these lines, that these are vertical. My previous lines were horizontal, and making use of those tools that were in our list that are very handy to draw things properly. And I'm going to do the line in here. Then, in pencil, I will draw from corner to corner, corner to corner, then the last one, corner to corner at the bottom. So now we should have a very dimensional, three-dimensional cube here with that line. So those blue lines that we see, we can erase those, like get rid of them. It's all fine. Or again, if we're drawing all this up and once we have a final drawing, if this was an illustration or such, this is just a demo. So we could trace all this back in blue and then do all our really clean lines. So for example, if this was dimensional, we would see that horizon line here, and it would show up because it's hollow on the other side. Box goes right through, then the horizon line picks up. So drawing through, we can make sure that horizon line all links and makes sense of giving the illusion that's a solid shape. Okay. So what we can do now is we can give some accessories inside this cube and work that out. So one of the things I want to do, and again I'm going to get my T-square and set square, we're going to be using both of those quite a bit in this drawing to make this work. And that is I'm going to do a footprint of a cabinet or a box inside this box. So I'm going to draw through it. And then I'm going to take my set square and draw upwards from those lines. Up here. And I'm going to establish the height of this by using my T-square to create that line. And I'll just complete it here. And then I'm going to go to that one point and I'm going to connect here. And I'm going to go up to this corner and connect it. Well, that line would come right down, but here, give me a solid object. So if I highlight that using my straight edge, using my set square, get a metal ruler, you can use it. So now we have kind of a rectangular box standing up against the wall. We can slide that in. So just penciling the lines that I want the viewer to see, even though I got lots of structure and lines inside. And again, if I wanted to get rid of these lines that would cover, that this object would cover, I can erase those. So you can see that we have a solid object here. I'll just go over my pencil. I might have erased some of that. There. So that's adding a dimensional object, 1 point perspective, all oriented to that box. The next thing I want to try is an opening. I'm going to put like a window, a hole, square hole on the side here. So I'm going to bring my perspective up this way. I'm going to bring perspective down this way. Then I'm going to use my T-square and my set square to make a line coming downwards. Now what I want to figure is to make a hole, I got to have depth. because we see the thickness here. As we get further down, that thickness would diminish because kind of foreshortening and distance would make some differences. But first what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a horizontal line from this corner, a horizontal line from that corner, and I'm going to get my set square. And again, I'm looking at that depth. I'm going to assume that'll be around here, that depth here, and bring this line up. Hopefully you can see this. It's a little bit further away, but hopefully the quality of the video will work so we can see this. Then I'm going for that one point of where those two lines match and follow that through. And the same over here, picking up that corner, moving that along. So I'm going to go over it with the lead pencil. So hopefully we have a convincing and structured opening in the side of this hollow cube, or what could look like a room here. Small room inside of this box. And we have these lines working, this one working, and we have horizontal lines connecting the depth of that wall. Okay. So here, so we've got an illusion of a wall, a room inside. Kind of clean this up a bit so we can see it a little better. There we go. So we have a ceiling inside that box, and we have two walls and then a floor. And if that floor was tiling, we can use some of our perspective lines here to pick up. If they were square tiles, we can work that shape out a bit. And again, they get bigger as they come forward. And then I can pick up the lines with the straight edge on the vanishing point lines and just highlight the ones that are actually a grid of tiles, all lining up to that vanishing point. I'm kind of using the existing grid lines, but I'll change the size a bit because I want them to try and make them consistent across. So in the front they would be bigger and they'd get smaller as they diminish back, but they should maintain the same width as they come across this way. And hopefully I'm getting that working a little bit here. So I'm just picking out the lines that help give us solid tiling on the floor. There we go. Yeah, this just happens to kind of work on that one. So I want to make sure that's on the vanishing point. Oh, went too far. And this one here. There we go. So I didn't mean to get that line going through there. So there we go. So now we have a nice contained room box here. Okay. So what we'll find, the location of this box is not quite halfway on that horizon line. There's more height than there is below it. So what you'll find is this distance, let me use the red pencil to point this out. You'll see the distance between here and here is less than the distance from here to here. And that's because the height is higher from the horizon line than this one. So the theory, what we want to make sure we remember is our horizon line. The further things are away from the horizon line, above the horizon line, we're looking more up into it. And things that were below the horizon line, we're looking down into it. So because this isn't as far below as that is high, we're not seeing that depth is shallower than the top. So these are principles that we want to remember. Anytime we're doing a drawing, we want to establish our horizon line. When we do our drawing, we want to follow the rules of what happens to perspective in relation to that horizon line. Okay, so hopefully we're all good with that. I am going to, just to prove that theory, I'm going to do a couple more boxes, and then we're going to get into some cylindrical shapes, which are trickier for sure. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a footprint of a box over on this side, and I think I'll make it a little closer here to make sure it all fits in this view and we can see it. And I'm going to create a this box is going to be closer to the horizon line than the other one, and we'll see what effect it has to this box. So again, with 1 point perspective, the front face of any square or square type object or whatever with straight lines is going to be two-dimensional. We're going to find a two-dimensional shape. So here we got a rectangle. This here is quite square if anything was horizontal this way. This one's going to be horizontal this way. I am going to give it some depth, but I'm not going to make it as thick as the other one, as this object. So I'm making it kind of half that thickness. And I'm going to try and make that thickness as uniform around here as I can. And there we go. That worked out. And now I can look at my 1 point here is the center point for all my perspective. So I take the inside corner, bring it through this outside corner over here. And then I have this one coming through, and then I have this corner here that I'm going to bring over to that part. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up this, I'm going to figure out the depth of this one. I'm going to have it about here. So whatever that is, if I bring the, where it joins, that vertical line joins the horizontal line, which is going towards the 1 point perspective, I'm going to bring that across. And the same with down here. So with that, where that connects here, I'm going to bring this down for the outside of that box. Okay. So now I can go over with pencil. So I've got a more solid look here. So we can see what's happening with the structure on here. I'm going to use my horizontal lines using my T-square. Bring this one across, but again, I only want to see what the viewer would see. I drew through, but this time I'm going to hold back and just draw what the viewer would see in that from those angles. So now I'm going to take my set square, draw the rest of my lines, draw this line here to here, and here to here. Bring this one here, and this one here. So you can see I've got that dimension, I've got that thickness. Now the rest of the lines, I'm going to use a straight edge and go towards that center line. So that's angled upwards towards the horizon. This corner is going to go here. Hopefully it comes close to that corner. And then this one here comes in. And then this one follows that vanishing point, and that completes this rectangle. So as we saw here, because this distance from here down to here. And now this distance way up here. Now we're seeing more up in the ceiling for this box, and just not much at all at the bottom. It's quite a sliver because it's so close to the horizon line. Yeah, we just see a slight bit of that depth. So one more thing I want to do, and that is I'm going to put something on this box. It's not going to be a dimensional object. I want to put a poster on this box. And yeah, just for interest, I'm going to say that this is a solid box, so I have some shading here, just using my blue to create some lines to show that that back facing is solid here. But what I want to do now is I'm going to put a poster, a label on the side of this box. So I'm going to try and center that a bit. I'm going to use the same line from this corner down to the vanishing point. And this line, let's see, say about here. I'm going to take that across to the vanishing point. So I'll pencil that in so we've got it. See it clearly. So this is just to represent that any detail we put on the side of whatever surface we're drawing, it's got to be in the same perspective of the box itself. And since this is a square or rectangular poster label on this box, that perspective has to continue down the side of it. Now the other thing I'm going to do, let me see, I'm going to try and find kind of the center, but I can make it so that it's slightly favoring to the left as opposed to the right, a slight bit more space here. Not sure if I really achieved that. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring from the vanishing point, I want to create some lines up here that I can use for reference for what I'm going to do next on that poster. And I'm trying to space things out, so I'm going to have some text and I'm going to draw something up here. So I'll use my straight edge here that I am going to create. Again, if it's a label on the box, it's going to be like a shipping box. I'm going to have an arrow pointing up so we know what which way's up on this, the shipping of this box if we fill it with something. And then I'm going to print some text. This side up. Hopefully you can read that. Well, hang on. Hopefully when I pencil this in, you'll be able to see that clear. And even the lettering, it has to follow those perspective lines so that it looks like it's on the side of this box. So again, we want to create the illusion of structure and depth, and every line, every bit of detail's got to reinforce that illusion. Otherwise, we lose the plot here and it'll fall apart. We won't fool our audience. Okay? So there we go. So just to point that out, and what doesn't work, and I've already seen that happening a bit with your characters and other drawings, and your 2D and 3D drawings, and even the egg rotations, is that if I draw a box inside on this wall, and it is horizontal and vertical lines, that gives us a real optical illusion. This causes confusion to your audience. This is reinforcing your perspective. This is countering that. This is showing 2 dimensions on a 3-dimensional object. And that messes up the viewer. We talked about unity in our elements and principles of design. And this being 2-dimensional on a 3-dimensional object our lines are not unified, and we have chaos and we have confusion. So that's what we want to avoid. We want to make sure we're following our perspective lines, our structure, so that every line we put down reinforces that structure and that illusion we're creating. Okay, so I'm going to do one more box, and then we're going to get into some trickier stuff. So anyway, let's take a look here. I'm going to do a line here. Again, we're going to draw a cube. Let me see, I'm going to make this one a little narrower here. Use my set square to create an opening on this side. Are we still good on here? Yeah. And here, I'll make this square here. And again, I'm going to give that some depth. So I'm going to make some wall dimension here. So again, it's going to be open faced on the front. They all have been here, so we can see that structure. And put a line down here. And now I'm going to go back using this 1 point perspective. I'm going to go back here and pick up this point, bring that back, and pick up this point over on this edge and bring that one back. So what I can do is I'm going to bring this line up here, and where that connects with the angle, I'm going to bring that across this way. There we are. So we've got some overlap between the two objects, and that's fine. So you do want to draw through. You want to make sure what would you see and where would this wall come up if that came across and that works up, and now you have an object in front of it. Okay. So let me just go over with pencil the lines that I want the viewer to see. And again, we're starting with a 2D rectangle, and then we're finding the depth by the corners going back to the vanishing point. So again, follow along, stop the video, replay it if you're missing anything, just to understand how this works. It really is a demo on just perspective structure in relation to horizon line, something we haven't really addressed properly. So it's time that we start looking at that overall perspective in relation to a horizon line. And again, this week's lesson is 1 point perspective. We'll look at 2 points, so it's going to get much more complicated. So we want to understand what's happening in these ones as straightforward as we can. So here, I'm going to pick up this corner inside and pick up to our 1 point here and bring this back. Let's see if I got that lined up. Then what I want to do is find this corner. And actually I got to bring it up a bit because I want to see the depth of that wall. So I'm going to bring this up as if that was the wall here and bring that across. And what I should be doing is picking up that corner, bringing that back, and then where that connects, then we can bring that line across. So if we drew through, we could see the depth and dimension of inside that. But that's just to establish where that line goes. And then where that picks up this angle, we're going to draw a vertical line. And that will let us know that this is the back of the box. We can see a bit of the backs of the box, so it's not hollow all the way through. So we can see that line. I'm going to use my straight edge to pencil in. Bring that across, and then that up. So we have a solid wall on this side, and the deeper we go inside here, we have that back wall of that unit there. So again, now if I have an opening on the side of this like I have here, let's work that one out. So I am going to decide how thick this wall is going to be, or this opening, window, what have you. Then I'll use my T-square with the set square to get the vertical lines on that. Then I got to work out how thick that wall is. I'm going to say about there. It could be a little less than this because it's getting farther back. So I'm going to bring that line down. Now it just happens it's lining up to that line that I was bringing across here. So if that's the case, then I'm going to, at one point, I'm going to pick up from here and bring that forward. So I have the depth of that. Okay. So let me find my pencil, work out that opening, and then it's all those lines are heading towards that 1 point perspective. So hopefully that when I pencil them in, it's clear on the video of how that's working, and that we understand the structure of that and how we got there. And then we have this opening here. So what we got, if this was going through, then this is the back. What we do at the same angle. So that's the rest of that back wall that we're shading against, that we see through that window area. So it's all structurally sound. It works. What I do have to do is bring this horizontal line through, so that this is all the lines, what we would see through the structure of that angle. So again, we have the depth from the horizon line down to here, and it coming down over to here. So what we have is, because this whole box is below the horizon line, we're seeing the top of the box. And because the top of the box comes, to this depth, that when we look at the inside of the box, we see more of the inside because it's further away from that horizon line. So we're going to see more here and less as it gets closer to the horizon line. So this happens in real life. If you observe in your room and take a look at shelves and a desk and a cabinet and whatever, and try to establish the horizon line, and you'll see this holds true. So this theory actually works in practice, and it helps us draw in that theory so that our drawings are relevant and the viewer can relate to it, and it makes sense and it's solid, and our magic's working. Okay, so next we want to tackle a couple of cylindrical objects. So it gets a little tougher from this point on. Okay. So now we're going to get a little trickier. We're going to create a cylinder sitting in this space. So what we're going to do, like we have in the past, we're going to kind of create a box and carve in the cylindrical shape. And it's going to be sitting down on this space here. So what I want to do is I want to pick out some lines here. See how well I can make this work. And again, try and make it in the middle here as best we can. So here's our center line, and that's where that's line going. So I'm going to try and line this up over here. So let me see how this is going. Well, this is going to work. And now I'm going to pick this line and bring that back. So we're using the T-square. I am going to bring this across. Just happen to line up with this one, which is good. Now we got to figure out the depth, you know, how far back I'm going to go. So if this is a cylindrical object and it's going to be laid down on that surface, this distance here is not going to be same from here to here. I got to cut that back because of the perspective. So I'm going to kind of guesstimate that. So I'm going to take it, that might be a bit too far, maybe about here, so that I can see that shape. And let me just pick up this line. So hopefully you can see the footprint of where the cylinder is going to sit. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a dimensional box here to try and work this out a little better, or plan this ahead. Bring this up, I'm going to bring this up, do the same over here, and over here. And now I'm going to work out what's the height of this cylinder. So I'm going to, let me see, I'm going to go about here across, and then work this out from that angle back to the one point. And here's where the back came up and meet. So now we can see how much of the top of this we're going to see of it. Now I've got to try and figure out the same. I've kind of lined this up almost perfectly to the intersecting lines, but again, this is the box. The actual object won't line up to that quite perfectly. At least I hope. Okay. So we got that working. So now what we want to do, and I'm going to draw up here a square, and we're going to take a look at how we're going to get this circle and find the ellipse of a cylinder. So if we look straight down at this cylinder that I'm going to put on here, it's going to, let me see. If you recall, I did this little sketch previously when we're looking at drawing circles, that this was a method to help us draw a good circle. Oh, bent that. And then where that intersects, I can get a vertical line, make that work. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to add some lines here. Let's see. So I'm going to kind of try and divide that, subdivide that into 3, and do the same on the other side. Just eyeballing it right now. And then do the same. I haven't really made this too square. That's not too bad. I should have measured these sides so that they're equal sides. So again, the idea here is at these points, when I draw a circle, it lines up here. So drawing these lines, this kind of helps, gives me a point where the arc of that circle can, for example, if I go from this point to this point to this point, that should give us a good 1/4 of a circle. And if I use that as a guide coming around this way, not sure if that worked out quite as well, that gives me the other quarter. And then again, coming across, and again, this gives us that arc coming this way, and use that coming this way. So again, I'm not sure if I really measured this distance is the same as this distance, but the idea holds true. So I can do the same at the bottom of this box. I can go from corner to corner. This is the footprint of this cylinder from here to here. And then it just happens that I measured that, so that line works. Now I got to get my set square to bring a line across here. Now I can work out the same dimension here. So if I look at the thirds here, you know, I can kind of guesstimate that that might be here, that might be here and here. So now if I bring this arc across and then look at bringing this, smoothing this out and coming down here to this point, and then doing the opposite here, and then bringing this arc up and connecting here. All right, so get an idea, anyways, of establishing that ellipse. And the one that really matters is the one up front that the viewer would see, and the rest is drawing through that object. So now what I want to do is this line here, I want to bring this up. So we're finding where that connects with the top. Bring that through, and again, I've overlapped this image here. So it's making these lines a little bit more confusing. But I do have this center line here. Now I can go from corner to corner. I hope I can. There we go. We can see that. And then from this corner down to this corner. And then I can bring, hopefully all these lines line up. Gives me the center. So I can do the same thing. Like I'm going to try to connect the top of this cylinder and what we would see at the top. Let's see if I can bring this down. All right, so I'll try and pick that out with a pencil and make that work better. And then what I can do as well is erase where it overlaps the other object here. So again, talking before that for good composition, overlap is good rather than have everything evenly spaced away from each other. But what I can do is I can just erase what we wouldn't see that this object would be sitting on top of. And hopefully that'll make this a little clearer, what we're doing with this. Okay. We are, again, I'm kind of trying to bend myself around. Okay. And then I can connect this line at the edge of that ellipse down to the edge of that ellipse. And you'll see it's a very smooth transition. You don't end up with a point, it's a smooth transition. So in the bottom that might be clear that this curve comes and smoothly comes off that line and continues around. Again, this is kind of awkward. I like to move my paper around, but I got it all locked down on my drawing board so that the camera picks it up. But there we go. So we can see that this is what we see at the top. And then here is, let me use blue, the ellipse that makes the bottom of that a cylinder. Okay. So if we talk about a surface detail like we had up here, what we need to do is, and again I'm going to freehand this, is try and work out that ellipse, what would that ellipse look like a little further down, and then what would that ellipse look like closer to the bottom. And that's all to find these curves here. And then I should use the t-square set square to make sure this is vertical. And then I could have a label on here as well. So hopefully that's matching a bit. There we go. And let me go over it with pencil. Then again, that detail, if this is a label on that surface, it should have those arced lines, so it's reinforcing the cylindrical shape of the object that we have. And let me, now that I'm doing this properly with the t-square and the set square, I can make sure these lines line up to these edges of the object. Okay, so I've got one more object, one more cylindrical type object I'm going to draw in this space over here. And it's the same idea. I'm going to draw the footprint of this object over here. I'm going to bring this line here, this line here. Bring this one out. And I'm going to do the same thing to find the footprint, to find the ellipse on the ground. I'm going to go from corner to corner. I'm going to go from corner to corner. Then I'm going to find the center of this by the X, but going to the vanishing point here. And then I'll use my horizontal set square to bring that across. Okay. So now it's the same idea. I need to draw that cylindrical, or the ellipse shape that it touches these points here. So you can see it's twisted because it's off the center. So we got a figure of how that ellipse would fit into that space. So that might even come out here a bit more. Okay. And for this one, it's going to be a cone shape, so I'm going to bring this line straight up. And then I'm going to make it a little further up. Again, overlapping another object here at the height. So now it's bringing this height down to where that curve is. And the same with this one. I'm going to bring this height down from that point to where that arc is. And then try and make that a smooth transition. And I will use my pencil. Let me just sharpen that up a little bit. So again, I'm just going to do the pencil on what the viewer would see. I drew through to make sure I had an ellipse that worked. Hopefully that kind of works. There we go. And now a straight edge coming up here. And again, now those lines that I drew on this box, I can erase those because you wouldn't see them anymore, because my new object is solid in front of that. So let me get this line transitioning from this edge up to here. Okay, so again, try and follow along, try and make this work. Again, this object would have ellipses coming all the way up, so if there is any detail that you wanted to put on here, it would all work on that surface. You know, if I had a light source, you know, I could be, like I did on the hammer and other things, I could kind of start working on, you know, using those ellipses for some shading lines to kind of look at the structure. Reinforce that shape here. There we go. Can do the same on here, but just want to make sure you see the structure of how that came together. All right, so I'm going to just draw that on here. 1 point perspective. And then next week, next lesson video, it'll be 2 point. So it'll get a little more complex, but try and follow along on this one. Draw this up as best you can. Follow the steps and see if you can work out those structures. All right, great, good luck.